I really I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't like trying to make it happen. It never even crossed my mind. But during the session, I looked over to my left and you were standing in the room. And this is going to sound really weird, but you were standing there wearing blue jean pedal pushers, which I don't even know if you have any, but that's what you were wearing. And you were wearing like a paisley top. The point is, it was very, very clear that it was you. It wasn't like a you like a mystical, like you could hardly see you. I mean, I just looked over and I'm like, hi, Kristen.
Well, I
And
think you said, holy shit. And then you said
well,
I and then you said I disappeared. You also said I was floating off the ground. And so how do you make what do you make of that? Like that yeah, it's funny to talk about it, but it was real. I know that I had something like that when my mom passed away and she came to me, and it's realer than real. So what do you make of that? Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Husted, and my practice is well balanced. And today I am interviewing Don Watts. He is a father of two children, as well as 12 grandchildren. He served as a civilian and military police officer and retired after 22 years as a civilian police officer. During that time, he served in a variety of positions to include Street Crimes Unit, Detective Crisis Negotiation Team, Neighborhood Response Unit, SWAT Technical Support, Fatal Team Instructor, Field Training Officer, and his favorite was Patrol. Welcome, Don.
thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks. And just for the audience sake, Don and I worked together through doing fascial stretch and Reiki just to help him on some healing of his body, and we've worked on some emotion and some spiritual awakening as well. And so we thought that through our conversations when we are on, we do a lot of Zoom work together, a lot of Reiki, distant Reiki, but then also in person, we have found that our conversations have been really interesting, right? We take them off and we go down these paths that I find very fascinating, and I find that it is awakening and it helps to spark conversation that I think needs to happen in order for people to really awakening into who they truly are. And so I asked Don if he would do a podcast because I felt like he has some great insight, especially the work he's done and working with trauma in his own life, and also working with the police department and all the trauma units and things that he has done, seeing probably the most difficult situations and negotiating with people who are in very tragic places, and not only his own safety and security at bay, but also just taking that trauma home. And so I thought maybe we could talk about ways that Don has released that trauma, not only work trauma, but also his personal trauma and physical and emotional. So do you want to say anything before I get started, Don?
Well, just that I too have enjoyed our conversations. And I feel that a lot of what we talk about is a starting point for other things that I do to make my journey, my spiritual journey, one that's more effective.
All right. So tell us about your career as an officer and talk about what it was like to deal with the stress and trauma on a daily basis.
Well, the first thing that I'd like people to understand is that police officers see much more trauma than one would think. Of course, police officers are going to see a lot more in the types of calls I responded to. But to give you kind of an idea, a police officer, well, let me back up. A regular person has less than 40 traumatic events in their life. These are serious things. These are stuff that they really need to process. Depending on what reports you read, police officers in a 20-year career will experience between 500 and 800 traumatic events. Some of the things that I've seen is I can't even adequately describe it. But the hardest part for me was always when we brought it back to the person's family. In other words, when I was the officer there that had to explain what was happening and what was going on, and I remember one call where I literally held his wife while he died in front of us. Things like that are very traumatic for me, and you see a lot of things that just the normal person doesn't see, and it makes it really difficult. Over the years, I was the type officer where, I held everything in. I didn't talk about it. My generation of police, just by way of comparison, I retired about 12 years ago. And we held everything in. We didn't discuss anything. It was a sign of weakness. And I completely disagree with that. I read a little phrase the other day, and it said, the hardest word I've ever said was help.
Well, and I'm curious because not only are we talking right now about your work as a police officer and the trauma that you did that, but you said earlier, everyone has trauma. And since you have up to 800 more instances of trauma as a police officer, and now you have your own trauma as a regular person, how did you personally get through some of your trauma? And was it effective, and or is it just a slow process of releasing the trauma as you go through life?
It's an extremely slow process. In my experience has been that it's an extremely slow process. The first thing that you have to do is recognize what the trauma is. I'm 62, and I didn't start realizing much of this stuff until about 3 or 4 years ago. I accepted everything. I pushed everything down. I thought that these feelings were completely normal, and that there was no need for me to do any kind of resource because I was healthy emotionally. Well, in fact, you can only put so much water in a cup, and then someday something's going to happen to overflow that cup. And that's what happened to me. Um, that something happened in my personal life, and it was just more than I could handle, and it pushed me over the top. Then, as I was identifying that, I started seeing things all the way back when I was like 7 or 8 years old that I never gave any thought to, that I thought I had completely under control, when in fact I don't. And I need to process that. And that's okay. But I'm at a stage in my life now where I've identified that, I recognize that it's an issue, and I've been able to reach out to a variety of modalities that have been able to help me. Everything from traditional counseling to Reiki to guided meditation to spiritual response therapy, just a variety of things. Anything that resonated with me, I gave it a chance. And that's what I would tell, the people watching this video. is just give it a chance.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't work for you, that's okay. Go on to the next thing, but you got to give it a chance. So
Mm-hmm.
you've got to try these things to see what resonates with you.
Right. Well, it's interesting because the things that you ventured down into the Reiki and the spiritual response therapy, and obviously the work you do with me, the distant Reiki and fascial stretch therapy, those are more alternative, right? But have you found that those have helped you awaken a deeper part of you as you're healing, not only from the trauma, but have you awakened to more? And also what got you into metaphysical spiritual work? Like, why did you go down that path and not the traditional counseling? And that was it.
Well, I actually did do some traditional counseling. I currently have a traditional counselor that I go to, um, and she's the one that actually referred me to you. So I do the traditional counseling, but I feel that a lot of what the traditional counseling does is focused more on what's happened in the past and a little bit about what's going on in the future. And with alternative things like the guided meditation, I almost feel that's reversed. We talk about things that have happened in the past, but we're focusing on how we can make the future better and how I can process that information to be happier tomorrow. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, because that's what we do too when we work together. And and I found that with my practice that I love to stay in the here and now. We revisit, and I think we probably did that with you too. That little boy or that wounded child, we'll revisit that during the meditation times when I'm doing fascial stretch, and we give that space to heal. And then once that all those emotions are released, then we come back into the here and now, and we do process the feelings and move forward. Which I know we can't build a healthy now carrying the baggage of our past. And so you can't recreate something from the old template. You have to create newness. And so yeah. So no, that's what we do together. That's what I know you've done with other practitioners.
I would say in the last 2 years, it's almost become a priority with me. And I'm literally reading a book, um, or going to some type of treatment or talking with somebody on the phone probably 6 days a week now.
Mhm.
I've read a ton of books. I just finished your book. And for those of you that, and this is not a paid
I
endorsement.
did not, I didn't ask him to say anything.
Right, right. But I really enjoyed it. It was amazing to me, the parallels
Mm,
between the stories in your book and what I've experienced personally. So I really encourage, if those of you that haven't purchased the book, please do, because it really really is going to set your intention and your belief and give you an understanding of what the possibilities are out there.
mm,
Things that we as a society have kind of lost over the last 1,000 years.
right.
So
Well, and I think, well, thank you. And by the way, I didn't ask him to say that, but thank you. Um, so it's interesting because I think even just the concepts in my book are concepts that I have discovered through observing my clients, right? Because that's how the book came about, but also concepts that I think are being broadcasted spiritually. I feel like, it's kind of going throughout the land that these are some things that we all need to heal from. We need to heal from our past attachment to who we thought we were, to our traumas, and that how those events we thought we think create who we are, but they're none of what create who we are. In my book, I always say divine. sparks of light. We're divine beings. We're straight from God source. And again, however anyone wants to say that. But with that being said, I feel like there's just this underlying current coming throughout the land that is awakening everyone to, hey, wake up. You're not just that person, as I say, Joe the plumber, or, Sally the divorced woman. We attach these labels to ourselves, and that's not who we are. So it's almost like, if I could say what I've noticed in my practice is an awakening, a deep awakening, that people are starting to awaken to who they truly are. And so with that being said, and saying that you've awakened and come into spirituality, do you feel like there was anything in your childhood that you had to actually let go of that persona and say, that's not who I am? And how did you learn to walk into newness? Because people they get stuck on, how do you let go of that persona that you've always thought you were? Well, I'm that child that got beat up, or I'm that child that was left out. And then they carry that on to their adult life. Did you have anything that you can remember in your childhood, and how did you move forward?
There's absolutely things that bothered me, um, apparently as a child, and I didn't recognize that it bothered me as a child. But now, when I'm doing the work that I am doing now, I'm able to kind of recognize those things. Just as a very small example, when I was maybe 10 years old, anytime my brother and sisters and I got home, our stepfather would lock us out of the house until dinner time. We were not allowed to go in our house. And I never really thought much about it, because when you're 10 years old, you don't have any point of reference. Well, now I realize that really bothered me. It felt like, my family was turning their back on me, and just pushing me away by locking the doors. And it really bothered me. But now that I'm able to identify it and say, hey, that wasn't your fault. Now I'm able to start healing from that. And it's kind of like, I feel like I need to start when I was younger, and then move forward in my life to the point where I'm at now. But I have basically identified it, put my spiritual energy through Reiki back in alignment to where it needs to be. And by putting things in alignment, it's helped me process what I need to process, for me to move forward and create or envision what I want for my future.
And so, where I find that most people get stuck is, and we all do it, is we pull back from that past. So we'll say, "Oh, I healed that past. I'm not that little boy that got locked out, or even if it was a relationship issue that hurt us, I'm not going to revisit that." But we do. So how have you separated yourself from that past so that you don't pull it back? Because the mind doesn't know if something's happening now or if it happened in the past. And so every time we revisit the past, we need to heal the past. But then how do you stop revisiting the past in order to pull it forward again, in order to keep creating the same scenario? You want to break that chain. How do you do that?
I acknowledge it. I accept that I have healed that, and I move on to the next issue. I don't spend any time on it.
Yeah.
I just move on after I'm convinced that I've healed that issue.
Right, right. With compassion for yourself and all that. When your physical issues are great. If you don't, you can just talk in general. But how do you find that peace in the storm when things still aren't, quote, perfect in your life, but you're still finding that stability and peace? How are you doing that?
So, for clarity, I was having issues with my back, for many years, and I still have quite a few issues with my back. And I had been told decades ago that when you have emotional problems, that they often go to the weakest part of your body and kind of exasperate that issue. Well, I literally went from walking with a cane because of my back issues to about 80% of the time, I now use a wheelchair because I keep falling over. I have fallen dozens of times and I've had um, way too many concussions. I've ended up in the emergency room. It's literally knocked me off my feet. What I try to do is focus on what the future looks like. I try to focus on how I can improve um, spiritually. I do a lot of reading. I talk to a lot of people that I respect that are doing this. And the one thing that I've started to do because of my personality is I like to teach. And I'm getting, as I'm healing, I'm getting more and more people calling me just to talk. And I'll be the first person to say, I don't have the answers for half the questions they ask, but I'm a really good listener.
Going through the grief and trauma counseling certification program, they said, our trauma will always come, our issues will come and they'll knock at the door, but they don't get to come in you anymore. Once you've done the work,
Right.
they don't get to come in you and wreak havoc. They get to be right here, and you can say, hey, how are you, Sally Sadness? And what do you want to tell me today? And they'll tell you all the woes and everything, and you say thank you so much for sharing. And then they said, then you just turn your sadness around and say thank you, and you send it out the door or up to the light or out to the stars or however that works for you. So um, that's a big hurdle for a lot of people, not to keep rehashing. So I was curious where you went with that. So, where are you now on your emotional and physical journey in life? And if it's okay, I'm just going to say when we first started working, there were a lot of those stuck emotions that you had said you had shoved in as that police officer. You never got to express yourself. So we walked through all that and got all those emotions out. And so now I find that you're way more like in the here and now and stable, and you still feel your feelings, but it doesn't like take you down. It's almost like the body had to release a tidal wave of emotion for a while there.
And
Where are
and I,
you at now?
I think it did. There was I don't know, maybe our first 5 or 6 sessions. To be honest with you, I would cry uncontrollably. What was coming out of me was just unbelievable. I have never cried uncontrollably before, and it was embarrassing for my personality. And then I thought, well, this is what I have to go through, so let's just push through it because my desire to heal was so great that I would rather be embarrassed for crying than continue to live in the sadness that I was living in.
Yeah, yeah. And so you find today that you feel more stable emotionally and
I think that I'm absolutely more stable emotionally. Um, there are times when I start thinking about my ex, and it causes me to cry, but it's maybe like less than a minute,
Mhm.
and then I stop, and then I start processing the pain and trying to understand more of what happened and how I'm going to deal with it and how I'm going to move forward and how I'm going to be happy in the future.
And so, those who don't know all that I do, I work with physical and emotional issues, and they usually go hand in hand, right? So that was your emotional part that we went through, but then the physical part has been more of a challenge. I don't even like to say you're still working through that, and it's still on the horizon, and yet I find that what did they say? Like in the midst of the storm, you're finding peace. So how are you finding peace when you still have, if you want to share what you have?
I really enjoy when I'm listening to an audiobook and I have gone to somebody for Reiki or guided meditation, and I have an aha moment
Mhm.
where something really just all of a sudden resonates with me, and I go, "Oh my goodness, that makes so much sense." But it's taken me time to settle down with everything else going on in my brain, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean I'm the type personality that analyzes everything and right, wrong, or different. That's the way it is. But I recognize that, and then I try to slow my thinking down with that. And then when I have these aha moments, they're really cool.
Yeah.
I really enjoy them.
So it's almost like what we were saying when we first started, that healing is a process. And I wish everyone knew that that healing takes time. And if you healed everything at once, we probably would explode because it would be too much for our psyche to handle. So as you heal, you take one little tidbit at a time and you heal it well, right? And you heal it and then you move on to the next one. And we always talk about, envisioning yourself walking and envisioning yourself in a healthy body, and yet accepting where you're at, I think, is the biggest thing, because what you're doing now is you're giving back to others that are learning from your position. So it's the hope, but then also letting go, right? And just accepting. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. When we do Reiki, what are the different ways that you feel you're healing? Because for a lot of people, it's like, how do they wrap their head around this spiritual healing? Ray meaning God's knowledge, and Ki meaning life energy. So we're asking the very essence of the universe, God, to come in and do healing. Well, how do you, as a very logical person, past police officer, take that spiritual concept and move it into your realm of existence, I guess, for a possibility to heal? And what do you actually get from it? And I know our conversations are always great after your sessions, because they match, which is also very much verification that I'm seeing the same things energetically going on in your body as you're experiencing once we're done with the session.
Wow,
That was a big one.
that's a big question. Um, you're correct, that I think very logically. So usually, what I need is multiple points of confirmation. So again, I'll be reading a book, I'll be talking to you, and I'll be talking to someone else that I work with. And all of a sudden, all three of you will say the exact same thing. And then my brain goes, "Oh my goodness, three people have just told me the same thing this week. So this has to be the truth. This has to be, the way God wants it." And when that happens, that's what convinces me that, in fact, I need to research that more so that I have a better understanding. But it also allows me to believe that that's truth. That's the way it really is. And this journey that I've been on the last couple of years has just been wonderful for me in understanding that and seeing that. very much so on a personal level.
Mhm.
And that's kind of where I'm at, that I'm excited every day to find out what I'm going to learn tomorrow,
Yeah,
and how I'm going to apply that to my life.
right. And I would agree with what you're saying, because what we're joking about the woo-woo factor. A lot of people are like, oh, that's woo-woo. And yet for me personally too, as I was getting into this and just working with people and hearing messages come from their body, and then tell them what I saw or heard, and they would confirm it's the same thing. It's like your own little scientific experience. You go, okay, I saw it. They experienced it. This must be the truth. And then now you take it another realm, messages that you hear, right? And then you say to the person, and they say, "Yes, I heard that too." And so I feel fortunate. You feel fortunate. It sounds like that you can start to plug those spiritual pieces into your life and say there must be something greater going on that is guiding me and moving me places that I cannot see. So it helps you to trust. For the person who what I can touch, feel, taste, and smell is all that is real. How do you think they can bridge that gap into a greater conscious awareness that there is more to this reality than we can taste, touch, feel, and smell?
Well, you're the first person that will put in a classification of all things woo woo, which I think is is hilarious, but so descriptive. Um, you're the first person that, when I'm doing a treatment, you'll say, "Hey, how did that make you feel? What did you see? What did you feel? How do you perceive that?" Usually, when I go to someone, they tell me what my condition is, and they tell me where I'm at, and then that's the end of the conversation. And there's been several occasions where, when you and I are talking, um, it happened, I don't know, a few weeks ago, where you asked me about something, I told you what I thought, then you told me what you perceived, and then all of a sudden it made more sense what I was seeing. So I think there's value in that validation with the communication between the two of us after the session. And I think when people start seeing that, you you're going to start believing in the treatment. You're going to start believing in the therapy, because you can't deny it. Just a small example. As you know, I fell here recently, and I hit the side of my jaw, and I think I told you that I just hit the side of my jaw, and I wanted to do a Reiki, just to like put myself back in the space that I should be in. And later, after that, you said, is the swelling on your right lower jaw? You knew exactly where it was, but I never told you.
Mhm.
I mean, you literally narrowed it down to the lower right jaw. How can I argue with that?
Right.
How can I, when I didn't give you that information, how can I say, well, that was just a lucky guess?
Mhm.
Well, it could have been my left big toe, but
Right.
it wasn't. You know
Right.
exactly where it was. And when things like that happen, it's not even, it doesn't even resonate. It's just the truth. It's just that simple. So now we go back to what I said earlier: try it,
Right.
experience it for yourself,
Mhm.
and you're going to find that there really is truth and value to
Mhm.
these experiences.
Well, that there's two things I'm thinking of that would be a great segue from what you just said. But One is, so I'm always telling my clients energy is real and energy has its own frequency and vibration. We're all energy, right? And so before I work on someone, I always jot down just what I'm sensing, and they're thousands of miles away, wherever they are. I'll write down what I'm sensing. And when they get on the call before we do the Reiki, I'll say, hey, these are the things I'm sensing. And then the person gets on the phone and tells what they're struggling with. I help them connect. Hey, I read this and you didn't tell me anything. You're dealing with this over there and you didn't think those thoughts were going anywhere. I think it happened to you and I once too, or several times. And I would say, so you're sending that frequency out into the universe and people are picking up on it. Whether it's, and I'm not saying you did this, but whether you're lonely or you're still angry at your spouse or you're dealing with a stress or trauma of a situation, that energy goes out and it radiates out, and so that's what I'm reading. So then it gets to that point where I try to tell people, hey, our thoughts and our energy are real, and so if it's radiating out and I can read it, so now we need to think twice about what we're thinking about. And when we truly heal, what does that mean to truly heal? Because if we think we healed from something but we're still sending those signals out, how do we even heal that? So I think that that's why healing can be so complicated, because we think, oh, I healed from that, but we're still replaying that in our subconscious mind. And so there's so much work about our lives are actually directed from our subconscious mind. So that's a little segue. I do want to talk briefly about the time that I appeared.
Oh, yeah, that was
So
weird,
how can you deny that, right? So
right?
do you want to? First of all, I will say my biggest joke with people is like, I'm going to keep expanding myself just spiritually and consciously until I can appear somewhere and someone can see me. And I've said that out loud to people. Well, you got to experience that, which was so funny because I've been saying this. So maybe just take that segue and run with what you experienced.
Sure. So we were doing a distance Reiki guided meditation, whatever you want to call it, session. And I really I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't like trying to make it happen. It never even crossed my mind. But during the session, I looked over to my left and you were standing in the room. And this is going to sound really weird, but you were standing there wearing blue jean pedal pushers, which I don't even know if you have any, but that's what you were wearing. And you were wearing like a paisley top. The point is, it was very, very clear that it was you. It wasn't like a you like a mystical, like you could hardly see you. I mean, I just looked over and I'm like, hi, Kristen.
Well, I
And
think you said, holy shit. And then you said,
well,
I. And then you said I disappeared. You also said I was floating off the ground, and so how do you make what do you make of that? Like that? Yeah, it's funny to talk about it, but it was real. I know that I had something like that when my mom passed away, and she came to me, and it's realer than real. So, what do you make of that?
at that particular moment in time, we were both willing to accept that you can project your image somewhere else. One of the books I'm reading is by Baird Spalding called The Journey, and it's about several scientists that go on a trip to the Tibetan area, and they talk about this exact thing. And I just thought it was really cool that I got to experience it. And other than you scaring the crap out of me, it was really cool, and I've been open to it ever since.
So, and how I looked at that was, and it just takes it to a whole nother level, is that we are all spiritual beings, and it's, again, it's bigger than like I can feel, taste, touch, what I always say, this 3D realm of how we experience our reality. And so I believe that we all have this light body, right? And this essence, our consciousness, and you can project it, and especially, as Dr. Joe Dispenza says, where your attention goes, your energy goes. If your intention is to help someone heal, then that's where your attention's going. And then so therefore your energy's going there. And then if your energy is really strong, then it probably pulls your light body. I don't understand it all myself. That's the first time that anyone had said. People say they can feel me working on them and stuff. Again, the energy is real, and they can feel the different spots, and they can feel the healing. So I thought that was fascinating. I do, again, I'm going to come back to, I feel like we're in a place where we're all awakening to more of who we can be. Telepathic communication, remote viewing, that's what I do for a living, is remote view, and reading energy, and channeling divine messages, and channeling. These are things we all can do because we are all made the same, right? So my desire and my hope in this world is that everyone starts to awaken and get out of this funk that this is all we are, and we've got to struggle all day long, and we have to struggle with everything, versus living in this place of abundance. Whatever is going on with your physical body, your spirit is abundant, and it can go anywhere. And so that's another freedom that we can have, despite the heaviness of this earthly experience. And so finding a balance between the two would probably be the best situation. I feel like we're moving that way, where everyone's going to start to become more lighter in their feel, and they're going to feel more connected. So anyways, that was a segue. Anything else you want to say about that?
I look forward to it happening again, and
That was funny.
once you get it figured out, let me know. And there's some people I'd like to go visit.
Well, there are people who, they astro travel all over the place. Yeah, I don't know.
But
I can do it with my mind. I haven't yet, mastered the body thing, but I will. Okay, so all right, so let's just wrap this up. What do you see for your future and your journey of healing? Again, I'm leaning into more like how we heal physically and emotionally, and it awakens us more as a spiritual being. Where do you see your future going as you transverse through your healing journey, and where do you want to end up in a spiritual way and a physical and emotional way?
well, physically, I'd like to get, literally back on my feet. This point that I'm at right now in my life physically is very frustrating. I 100% believe that it is not where I'm going to be the rest of my life. I believe that I will get rid of this wheelchair and be able to enjoy life in different ways. As far as my future, it's always been in the back of my mind where I want to teach.
Mhm.
I always thought it would be cool to be, the old guy up on the side of the mountain in the cave that, everybody came to for
Yeah.
the words of wisdom. And I've learned I don't want to live in a cave, but the idea of sharing my knowledge with people through, I've already started a book. And the book right now is going to be stories of things that have happened in my life, and then I'm going to try to somehow make that story a way that you can apply it in your life.
Mhm.
I very much want to help others and
Mhm.
share what knowledge I have with them in hopes of letting them heal and process that. Sometimes I feel that these major things that are going on in my life is just an opportunity for me to learn, to be able to teach so that I can help others.
Right. That's what
So,
I was thinking too. How would we know the pain of someone else if we haven't journeyed through? And so I'm gonna leave with this thought is that, oh, and then you're gonna leave with your quote from your father.
oh,
But I'll just say one more thing is that if you are out there listening and you are going through difficult times, it's those difficult times that build character and crack us open so that we grow. And so then once we start to grow, then we can use those difficult times to help others. And so how would you know if you have just this beautiful, wonderful life with no wind or resistance on you? You wouldn't grow. So as you grow, you share because we're here to, I like the thought of walking each other home. We're helping each other on this road to enlightenment and an awakening of who we are designed to be. So any final words or thoughts for you, and we'll end our podcast.
well, I just wanted to share one thing. The person that got me involved with all things woo woo
Mm-hmm.
was my father. And he actually taught me quite a bit. When he died, he gave me a plaque. It's a handmade plaque. It's made out of wood. But on the plaque is written the following words. It reads, "I'm okay, you're okay. God does not make junk." So think about that and realize that you are special and that you are worthy and that you should honor your feelings and look for ways to make yourself happy and envision where you want to be in your life.
That sounds great. And thank you for sharing. And I just appreciate your time. And I hope that you continue to grow on your journey.
My pleasure. Thank you again.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.